Trey's Hellcat Redeye lived up to its name. The engine growled in response to Trey slamming on the accelerator and opening up the throttle wide open. The tires spun in place, kicking up white smoke as it grasped maniacally for traction. The rear end of the Challenger fishtailed. By the time the tires gripped earth, the coupe was sprayed with a Draco. A whole 100-round drum dumped all into his car. It was after 2 a.m. Trey had just gotten off an exit off the interstate and was stopped at a light. Trey's eyes were staring into his phone when a set of high-beam lights reflecting off his rearview mirror caught his attention. The car pulled up aggressively behind him. Before Trey knew it, he heard the thunderous clap of the Draco letting off. Trey's tires screeched, accelerating through the intersection, across the opposite ramp, and back onto the interstate. Trey needed speed to get away. Anything other than the interstate would not lend itself well to give him the speed that he needed. All 4 of the lanes of the interstate were clear with the exception of the high-beam headlights pursuing behind Trey. These niggas keeping up? How? Trey thought in a panic. And they sending more shots. Pink, 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 pink. The rounds hit his car sounding like rain on a tin roof. Scattered, but consistent. Whoever this was, they wanted him dead. In the process of keeping his head low ducking shots, Trey lost track of the headlights. Trey had a hard time figuring out whether he was still being followed. Trey wasn't sure if they decided to cut their headlights and still maintain the chase. So he kept the accelerator down and the speed up. Adrenaline. Adrenaline is like the feds. When they active and working on you, you ain't gonna know shit that's going on. Trey was ignorant to the fact that adrenaline kept him from knowing that he was hit 11 times. A Draco in rapid fire is not accurate, especially if your target is kicking up smoke, slipping and sliding all over the pavement. The shooter obviously had no regard for the law, but the one law working in his favor is the law of averages. You take enough shots, and a few of them will certainly hit the target. As Trey continues to flee for his life, he miscalculated a curve in the road ahead. His eyes had been bouncing between his rearview mirrors, the road, and his phone. His eyes never quite focused long enough on the road to see the curve. Last minute, he spotted the curve and tried to adjust, but adjusted too strong. The car swerved, skidded sideways, and punched straight through the guardrail and began to roll. As the car rolled over and over and over and over itself, the $87,000 Dodge Hellcat Redeye crumpled as easily as a 50-cent can of Coke with Trey inside it. The vehicle abruptly stopped by wrapping itself around a tree like a Christmas gift. Trey had regained consciousness a few minutes later. His predicament was not good. He found himself upside down with his arms and legs pinned wherever they were. He couldn't move them. He couldn't feel them. His body was totally restricted, confined, and cramped. It was hard to breathe. Trey could hear his cell phone ringing back to back to back to back, but it was no use. He couldn't get to it. He couldn't reach it. His arms were pinned down. Trey called out to Siri to answer. If there was ever a time for Siri to listen and follow voice commands, now would be the moment. But in this moment of truth, Siri was deaf and mute.
Siri, you fucking bitch.
Trey said with tears in his eyes.
Answer the phone!
As the warm blood flowed out of the openings in Trey's body, the ice-cold fingers of death slithered in. Trey's eyelids would remain open until the mortician closed them. The last thought that Trey had before he died was,
Mama, forgive me.
Trey's mother had turned her back on him. She accumulated $200,000 of unnecessary debt on the count of Trey's legal troubles. The very last time he had spoken to her was a few years ago from a jail phone. The conversation was heated. Trey had ignited in anger. He had expected his mother to bail him out. And when she told him that she wouldn't, his entitlement sparked a fury in him. Trey threw a temper tantrum right there on the phone. That was not the right move. It just strengthened his mother's resolve. His mother had realized that her son would never learn. He'd never mature. He'd never grow up and accept responsibility for his actions. Trey is a failure. Trey Trey's mother permanently cut ties with him from that call forward. It took a while, but Trey Trey eventually realized his mother was right. He had been stuck in a cycle of going in and out of jail for petty crimes. Every time he was released, he would bum on her couch without contributing to any bills. Actions speak louder than words, so Trey Trey decided to keep his distance until his actions could win him access back into his mother's good graces, back into her love. Trey Trey had no real-world skills. He hadn't had a diploma. He couldn't get a job. Rap music was gonna be his ticket. He was gonna make himself a success, and then she would love him again. That was his plan. But once Trey Trey realized that he would never get to win back his mother's love, as he would prematurely die, the pain of sorrow was 1,000 times greater than the pain his body felt after being shot and mangled in the car wreck. Trey Trey cried tears of blood, all for his mother as he died. When news of Trey Trey's death hit Carlos's ears, it wasn't news to him. Trey Trey and Carlos had gotten into a public feud on social media. The feud led to Trey Trey dropping a diss song divulging details on how Carlos was a rat. Don Snow was a man involved with Carlos's mother. They had known each other since high school. Don Snow never fathered any of Carlos's mother's children, but he was still in and out of her life from time to time, but only when he needed something. Carlos didn't like that shit. So one day, Snoo was on the run fresh off a shootout. He was hiding out in Carlos's mom's basement until things cooled off a bit. U.S. Marshals issued a $5,000 reward for anybody who would give up information on Snoo. When Snoo left out to his next hideout, Carlos had tipped the officials anonymously and bagged the money. The streets couldn't figure out who the hell snitched up until now. Trey Trey detailed everything in his diss song. Now for normal niggas, being labeled a rat is a death sentence. Not for Carlos. No one pressed him about the song. No one pressed him about being a rat. Niggas would justify it by saying his name wasn't on no paperwork. He could never be on any paperwork because the tip was anonymous. They just tossed it out as hearsay. But in reality, no one pressed Carlos because he had just beat 4 murder charges. Lil Ron, one of Carlos's close friends, had gotten into it with a few niggas and they killed him. Carlos slid that night on feet. He didn't need a car. The speed and swiftness to which Carlos exacted his vengeance was so astonishing. They labeled that nigga Vicious. That was his name now. Vicious. Vicious Los. Carlos was always strapped. He always had a throwaway prepaid phone. He paid cash for everything. Carlos was prepared to stick and move anybody. Trey Trey violated with that diss song. Humans who get friendly and domesticate wild animals, animals like lions, end up down the line becoming the meal. From the outside looking in, Trey Trey and Carlos were friendly, and then Trey Trey provoked a lion. Everyone on the internet blamed Carlos for Trey Trey's death. The two of them were best friends. They had spent a lot of time with each other. Actually, they were the 3 musketeers. It was Lil Ron, Trey Trey, and Carlos since kindergarten. They had gotten in trouble together, fought together, beat cases together. Them niggas were brothers. Not by kinship, but by bond. Trey Trey had tucked his tail and stayed low when Ron passed. Carlos did all the dirty work. Carlos and Trey Trey had gotten into it with each other over that. But that was nothing new. Them niggas were brothers. They had fallen out with each other too many times to count. Carlos had gone upside Trey Trey's head a bunch of times. Trey Trey had pulled the pistol out on Carlos a bunch of times. Them niggas would just get into it. This was nothing new. No matter their difference though, they always held each other down. For the 2.5 years when Carlos was fighting those murder charges, Trey Trey would always put money on his books. Carlos never felt alone, never felt abandoned. He always had somebody to talk to. Trey Trey was his ears and eyes on the outside. They celebrated together with a bottle of Hen Dog first day Carlos was out. And Trey Trey always had real support, genuine support from Carlos. Carlos had talked him out of a lot of dumb shit. He was the voice of reason. Carlos always motivated Trey Trey to keep going with the music, don't stop. When Carlos received that $5,000 reward from snitching on Don Snow, he bought a laptop, microphone, portable booth, and other pieces of music equipment to jumpstart Trey Trey's rap career. The entire reward money, every penny of it, went towards Trey Trey. This was a fact that Trey Trey conveniently left out of his diss song. After investing the $5,000, Carlos took his place as Trey Trey's manager. As his manager, Carlos was always frustrated with Trey Trey's music. He couldn't do nothing with it. Trey Trey wanted to keep his music PG-13 in case his mama heard a song. That shit weren't gonna go nowhere. Trey Trey had the bars, he had the look of a star, his body was hella tatted, women was always choosing on him. Carlos felt that them two could really get somewhere, but if only Trey Trey could rap a little more gutter, a little more street, a little more raw. The argument between Carlos and Trey Trey that eventually spilled over onto social media started with Carlos exploding in anger.
Nigga, why the hell did you buy this car? Out of everything you could have done with the bread, you wanna buy this shit? Bitch ass nigga, you made yourself hot,
Carlos said angrily. Trey Trey responded by telling Carlos,
It gonna help the music, bruh. Chill.
Carlos was angry because Trey Trey could not understand how dumb his decision was. Trey Trey had just bought his Hellcat Redeye. They were in the process of shooting a music video. Trey Trey was sitting on the hood of the Redeye, and no matter what Carlos said, Trey Trey would simply brush him off. Carlos's anger kept ticking higher and higher and higher and higher. Trey Trey was in the middle of telling Carlos about how he couldn't wait for his mama to see the music video. Trey Trey was gonna have one of his cousins send his mama the video to watch. That's when Carlos snapped.
Fuck your mama, nigga.
Carlos yelled at the top of his lungs.
Fuck her and his car. None of this shit gonna help the music.
Trey Trey, being all too sensitive about his mother, lost it. Carlos had hit a nerve. Their argument escalated, and once they parted ways, it continued onto social media. When Trey Trey dropped the diss song, he had shocked the shit out of everyone. Everybody. The streets had tuned into the beef. The drama was all too alluring. Carlos was shocked too, but not for the reasons that everyone thinks. Carlos was ecstatic. He jumped for joy. The song had put a big old grin on Carlos's face. He had finally gotten the type of music he wanted out of Trey Trey.
Nigga, we up.
Carlos had thought to himself after listening to the song for the millionth time.
I'm still gonna have to smack him for calling me a rat.
Carlos was in awe on how beef and drama had affected the music streams. Nothing they had ever tried worked before. Better beats didn't work, expensive cars didn't work, paying for features didn't work. Beef was the special ingredient. As time passed, Carlos and Trey Trey had long since reconciled their differences. A little conflict wasn't gonna get between them. They were brothers. And as a business move, they kept the fact that they squashed the beef a secret to keep the people tuned in. The morning of Trey Trey's murder, Carlos was playing one of Trey Trey's songs on heavy rotation when he received a call.
No, they shooting.
Trey Trey had said with fear in his voice.
Who's shooting?
Carlos responded in high alarm.
Big Nate.
Trey Trey responded.
Big Nate, how you know?
Carlos asked.
It jack on my ass, bro. They keep it up. We doing a $140 on the highway.
Carlos could hear the bullets in the background striking Trey Trey's car. Before he opened his mouth to say what he would say next, Carlos heard Trey Trey drift and collide with the guardrail. As the sound of the crash pierced through the speakers of Carlos's phone, he yelled into the phone with no response from Trey Trey. Carlos called Trey Trey back to back to back to back to back with no answer. For the first time in his life, and with tears in his eyes, Carlos dialed 911. Big Nay was a club owner and promoter. Every year, Big Nay would throw an annual birthday bash event in his nightclub. It was the biggest event of the year in their city. Big Nay would book rappers from all over to come and perform. He had booked Trey Trey during their last event, not because Trey Trey was having motion, but simply off the strength of their relationship. During Big Nay's annual birthday bash, 2 rappers from out of town had gotten into it backstage. Shots were fired. People were hit, but no one died. During that commotion, someone had slipped into the back office and disappeared with all the money intended to be the back-end payments for all the rappers. It was a sum total of $142,000. Soon after, Trey Trey dropped a bag on a custom, souped-up Hellcat Redeye. Trey Trey had made himself a custom chain. His fashion, his designer game, his drip had upped instantly. Carlos, being the voice of reason, hated every second of it. He tried to warn Trey Trey, told Trey Trey he was making it way too obvious. Slow down. But Trey Trey wasn't having any of that. Trey Trey's stubbornness about how he was spending the money that he stole was the very reason why him and Carlos had a falling out. How it go in the streets is a ripple effect. Anything you do eventually catches up to you. And Big Nate, using his track hawk, had caught up to Trey Trey and his Hellcat. Everyone blamed Carlos for Trey Trey's death, but those closest to the two of them know the truth. The feds know the truth too. The feds found out who really killed Trey Trey by listening in on one of Carlos's conversations. Him and Big Nay had a talk.
Nay, you murked my nigga, bruh. You bodied Trey Trey.
Carlos said.
Oh? Trey Trey, the nigga who stole from me?
Big Nay said.
You could've hit my line, we would've straightened that out.
Carlos responded.
Hold on, ain't y'all niggas beefing? Nigga called you a rat. Nigga, you can't even straighten out your own shit, your own situation, nigga.
Big Nay said.
Yo, you murked my nigga. My brother.
Carlos responded, unable to control his emotions.
The nigga stole from me.
Big Nay responded. The media assumes that all savages and all demons are motivated by hate and destruction. But nah, the worst of them, the ones who reap nothing but carnage, are motivated by love. They slide for the love of their dead homies. Carlos interrupted Big Nay from talking by saying,
Oh, my mama. Oh, Lil Ron. Oh, Trey Trey, nigga. You go. Die.
Over the years, Big Nay had been threatened countless times before, but none of those threats had the level of conviction and confidence that he had just heard. Vicious Los had just made a promise. Quickly regaining his composure, Big Nay responds,
Well, hurry your bitch ass up then, nigga.
Carlos would never get to hear that. Carlos had dropped his phone where he had stood, and Vicious Los was out the door before it hit the floor.